The Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Better Edge. Visit betteredge.com right now. Grab $20 on the house using code SPOTTRACK at registration. That's $20 using code SPOTRAC at betteredge.com. My name is Mike Giannetti. It is Monday, February 23rd. We're in the tag window of the NFL offseason, which means things are moving, wheels are churning, the combine is here, winter meetings are upon us in terms of the owners. Doesn't sound like a lot of noise will be coming out of that this time around, but there will be plenty of noise in terms of player acquisitions, contract extensions, trade proposals, etc., as many important people bump elbows in Indianapolis over the course of the next 6 to 7 days. And we'll be reacting to that as much as possible with our projections, analysis, etc., which is the crux of today. We're going to go back to square one with this NFL offseason and go back to the quarterback position because, of course, it is the most important, but also the most interesting. I guess that's arguable this year. It's an interesting year, usually at the quarterback position, and we're going to put the entire gamut on display today. Available free agents, potential releases, potential trades, potential extensions, and a couple of TBD, unclear at this moment situations. That's up next. But first, if you hadn't had a chance to check out our NFL tools on SpotTrack.com, we are beefing them up literally every single day. The Managed Roster tool is basically rebuilt this year after launching that, kind of soft launching that last January. So it's been about 14 months, and it's at its best, highest heights here. We are building in new ways to add contracts to this thing. So obviously, I think the easiest, the most used way to walk into that managed tool is to start hacking and whacking, right? Release players, process cap conversions, get yourself cap compliant. We're trying to make the process of signing and adding a little bit more user-friendly. I think right now, my best recommendation is walk in, go to the free agent list, whether it's retaining your own team's free agents or going out to the league and bringing in somebody new. Just click on that market value ad, which is just going to bring that player onto that roster at the valuation that we have within SpotTrack, which we're hoping is as close as possible to reality. You can customize as needed, and we are adding new ways to customize both extensions and free agent contracts within that tool. You can also make it a minimum salary contract, a veteran benefit contract. You can tender restricted free agents. You can franchise tag, obviously, which is in vogue right now. And oh, by the way, transition tag as well, because there's some thoughts out there that Breece Hall is headed down the transition tag path, which I tend to agree with. It's at about $11.5 million tag. His valuation in our system is about $10.5 million, but that James Cook, Kyron Williams, $11 million contract is about right for Breece Hall. We're just not going to see many players go north of that, unfortunately. You know, we saw the Javonte Williams extension in Dallas at about $8 a year with some incentives to raise that. You know, we're going to see the same for ETN in Jacksonville and a few others across the league that are really important players. But unfortunately, in the grand scheme of things, those APYs just aren't increasing at the same rate as many of these other position groups. So I do recommend using our valuation process within that tool as much as possible. And then on the flip side, because we do have a few of those conversations happening today, we have a standalone trade machine. So if you want us to go in and acquire Max Crosby, if you want to move Micah Fitzpatrick off of Miami, if you want to take a stab at Kyler Murray, all those things are possible within actual cap constraints. You'll see the money move to and fro. You'll also see the actual draft picks for both 2026 and 2027 evaluated trade. You know, not really cap ramifications with those as of yet, but you can make the full deal trade. Post that on Twitter, tag at SpotTrack, and we'll give you some analysis. Certainly push that along and promote your hard work using our tools within SpotTrack right now. New tools every day, upgrades every day. Please give us feedback as needed so we can continue to make this both as easy to use and as easy to produce successful results as humanly possible. Let's talk some quarterbacks with Dan Silman. All right, Dan Zillman is here. It's a quarterback episode, Dan. I'm going to run through 5 categories. Not that we haven't done this already, but it kind of feels like something we should do in every couple of weeks here. So we'll, get ourselves back into the NFL mode, which is slow moving, by the way. No tags, a couple tag reports, the usual suspect of agents and maybe some teams throwing some trade requests out there and starting that process. But it is combine week, so I do expect plenty more, at least hot stove rumors to start simmering. So let's get ahead of it at this position specifically. And in fact, as we sit here recording, news is starting to trickle out that the Colts are indeed working towards some sort of multi-year contract for Daniel Jones. Exactly what you thought would happen, or did you think it would be a much more drawn out process that might even include some other teams getting involved?
It certainly makes sense, especially with the Anthony Richardson report that he was interested in a trade out of there. Was probably signal that they knew something was in the works behind the scenes. I think the biggest question was will he recover from that injury? But otherwise, I think everything worked there fine. So I'm good with it.
He's about $44 million on our system. Is that where you expect this thing to go, or do you expect it to be in the 50s?
No, I'd stick with your model. I mean, I don't necessarily think he's done anything to supersede what we have internally. So,
who is he right now in the NFL? Is there another quarterback that you think he should be latching on to, financially speaking, from a career standpoint, to take him to that next level? Or do you think, let me back up one more step. Do you think both sides right now are just looking for some sort of bridge plan to get to whatever that next level is going to be because of the injury, because of some other circumstances?
Yeah, that's probably the route, I would imagine. Up until the injury, I think the player side would have obviously been more interested in a longer term pact. But now I think both sides have some motivation to kind of take it year by year.
Yeah, I think it's going to look like a cap adjusted version of Sam Darnold in Seattle. Darnold obviously didn't have the injury, but he did have the fall off a cliff moment in Minnesota in the postseason, and maybe a little bit prior to that. Jones just simply had the injury to fall off the cliff with. But it seemed like both had very similar tracks with their respective teams here. Minnesota punted, obviously, for the McCarthy situation, to Seattle's obvious benefit. And I think that's probably what Indy's looking at. Like, hey, we're probably not super, super far away roster-wise, and we would be starting back at square one from a quarterback perspective. So I just think this is going to look like, is it a 3-year deal like Sam got that's around that, 120, maybe a little bit more than 120? Probably. That's what the cap-adjusted version of this looks like. But I think that's the player I'm attaching this situation to, and I think Indianapolis fans would like that because that is the Super Bowl winning quarterback. All right, moving on. We've talked about this guy so many times, and Dan, every single time I open up any sort of social media related to our Spot Track stuff, this is the name I'm seeing, both because of what we have, what other people are saying, what the talking heads are saying. I'm not going to try to rationale the Malik Willis conversation. I'm just going to ask it in this regard. Is there more than one team out there right now looking at him as their starting quarterback for 2026?
I am not going to pretend to be smart enough to know more than the talking heads. So I'm going to go with I'm going to assume there are multiple teams that would be interested in him, but I know your follow-up is going to be who, and I don't have that.
I don't think I want to try to rationale this yet. Because I don't want to put too much confusion out there with what we have. I will say this for some transparency. I have done 2 versions of our model with Malik Willis. The one that the computer actually tells me I should be doing, which makes him about an $11 million player, which is basically Sam Darnold joining Minnesota and Daniel Jones joining Indianapolis and Baker Mayfield joining Tampa Bay for that first year, which is completely logical, right? That is, if this guy is going to take that next step from nowhere, because he completely flamed out with Tennessee for, I think both team and player reasons, he's going to have to earn that, right? Nobody's just going to walk him into this Daniel Jones contract that we're talking about here, or even, the Sam Darnold contract, which is about $33 a year out in Seattle right now. I just can't imagine that a team, even if it's the Jets, who have shown blind faith many, many times at this position, I can't even imagine them going this route with Malik Willis. And yet, if I do that, if I put Malik Willis in the Bakers and the Sams and the Justin Fields conversations in our algorithm, he does have the smallest of sample sizes that gets him near 30, 35 million a year. So I can understand why, some of the networks are pushing their analysts to say, hey, let's pump this guy up a little bit, because this is a hot take that people are attaching themselves to. I just can't think it's any more than that this isn't just a generated story because we're looking for something to latch onto in the middle of February. And maybe this calms down a little bit. And I sure hope so, because the logic says this should be well under 20 million a year, because this player isn't even to Justin Fields status. And that contract was a disaster for the Jets last year.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's small sample size. He did not really show a lot of flashes in Tennessee, and then goes to Green Bay, and not a big sample size, but when he did get in the game, seemed to perform. Now, whether that's a LaFleur style offense or what, but I agree. So what I'm trying to say is our model is not going to get the number that high, but I think he's catching steam as like the hot, piece of the offseason that somebody might, in theory, kind of overpay for. What does that look like? I still don't think it's like super lofty, but
I get this part of the attraction. I don't want to spend too much time on Malik Willis, but I get this part of the attraction. If this works, we might just have our franchise quarterback for the next 10 years. That doesn't exist with Mariota and Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers and some of these other guys who are going to be sitting there available, and it might only exist with Malik Willis and, maybe Mac Jones and I guess maybe Kyler Murray, right? That list is small. So the ceiling that exists with Malik Willis is potentially insurmountable, right? It's massive, but you are going off of such minute data right now that it just doesn't make sense to build in, any sort of, and by the way, and I've said this before, it makes no sense for Malik Willis either to build in. Why would you want to pigeonhole yourself if you are going to be this next version of all these players that have kind of graduated to, from bust to next man up? Then show it for a year, make yourself the preeminent QB1 on the market, and go and actually get a bag where 5 teams are vying for your services. The reason I positioned this thing with my question the way I did is I don't think there's more than 2 teams seriously looking at Malik Willis. I know Miami's been attached to it. There's no way that Miami right now wants to put Malik Willis on whatever money it's going to take with the Tua situation that I don't think they're going to get themselves out of. And if they do, then you're trying to Bo Nix Russell Wilson yourself at a much grander level, at a much larger level, financially speaking. So I don't consider them in. The Jets are in. I think the Steelers are in. Those are the 2 teams that I think at least it makes sense because of how bare the cupboards are, because the opportunity to have a guy who could be a one-year wonder and then turn into the next 7 years of our, starting quarterback position. Those are the 2 teams I'm identifying. If I'm missing somebody, I apologize. I just don't think there's more than 2 teams. And when that's the case, this shouldn't get to astronomical numbers. So I'm going to stick with what our model says, what logic says. And if I'm blown away, then I guess good for Malik Willis. Let's move on here. Aaron Rodgers. What is the play there? Is it Steelers for one more year or we're done?
Honestly, I can't read this because when McCarthy got hired, it was sort of, well, it seems more likely they'll bring back Rodgers, but if I could be wrong here, but didn't that not end real well with them in Green Bay?
No.
So I don't really know why so many people were drawing that through line between the 2, but so ultimately I have no clue where this goes. Before the Mike Tomlin McCarthy swap, I was of the impression if Rodgers was back, it would be with Pittsburgh, continuity, etc. Now I really don't know. So I'm going to go back to you. Do you have a better read on this?
No, I don't. I don't think Rodgers signs a contract. And maybe it's the Flacco type situation where there's an injury, there's something drastic that happens. And he is preempted to sort of reopen a line of communication with the team if that seems to look good. I don't think there's a team for him. I don't think there's a team for Russell Wilson. I'm just going to bury that lead too. I think both of these guys have gotten past the point, and I shouldn't connect those two dots. Aaron Rodgers had a great season, all things considered. Over 65% completion. His passer rating was around 95. He's a viable starting quarterback right now. But when you put it all together, A to Z, what a team is looking for. Do we have a team right now, Dan, that is just all in on 2026 that needs Aaron Rodgers like Pittsburgh needed Aaron Rodgers last year? I don't know that we have that team right now sitting there. I guess Minnesota's the one team. If Minnesota really does not like what they're seeing, if there's serious chronic injury stuff going on with McCarthy, and also, obviously his ability to actually become a starting quarterback may be limited, that team probably has two options: Cousins / Rodgers, or we're blowing this thing up and we're trading Jefferson and we're trading Darrisaw, whatever it's going to be, right? I guess that's a landing spot, is Minnesota for Rodgers at the very last second. But other than that, I think I'm leaning towards he's probably going to walk away from this thing. Cousins, I think, gets a job. Do you agree with that?
I mean,
I know, because he hasn't looked good. Where Rodgers has sort of stabilized himself, Cousins has not.
Right. And to your original point with Malik Willis is once you start playing musical chairs, it runs out, there's very few seats to start with. So once you start trying to play the matching game, to me, you're bringing Rodgers would never settle for a backup deal. But to me, you're bringing both guys in as a veteran presence for maybe a Bryce Young type of player, but Rodgers isn't taking a back seat to Bryce Young in case Bryce Young flames out again next year, right? So other than that, like maybe I know the Raiders are sitting on the first pick, but maybe you don't want to throw a potential Fernando Mendoza to the Wolves. Maybe a Clint Kubiak style offense wants just like a game manager like they brought in with Sam Darnold before. I'm just throwing that against the wall. I don't actually think that's super likely, but to your broader point with both of those veteran type guys, it's going to be fun. It's going to be hard to find a spot for him. Yeah.
And just to bring the money back into it a little bit, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Malik Willis, they're all at about $10.5 million in our model right now. So if you just take the money out of it, because it seems like it's pretty streamlined, they all have their own different version of why you wouldn't want them on your respective team in 2026. I struggle to find actual landing spots. Now, look, everybody in the world knows Kirk Cousins when he's released, and we don't need to talk about that too much. They've already sort of structured the contract to make sure this happens. When he's released, they're going to owe him $10 million in Atlanta. So is that going to offset what the new team's going to have to pay him? In other words, is Kirk Cousins going to be a $1.3 million quarterback to a new team? If that's the case, of course somebody's going to take a flyer on that. Okay, if the best offer for Kirk Cousins is a vet minimum salary with some incentives built into this thing, there's going to be options out there for him, no question. My guess, though, is if that's the best option for Kirk Cousins, he's just going to retire and and get in front of a microphone and probably sign $15 million a year out of the gate with one of the big networks and go on down the sunlight from there, because this guy has done. He's made $20 million a year for 11 straight seasons at the minimum. Okay. This guy is not going back down to the minimum, in my opinion, unless he just loves football so much. He wants to squeeze every single ounce of juice out of his career. And certainly I give him credit for doing that. But where Rodgers might, drop into the 6 or 7 million to join a team at the last second, I don't think that's in Kirk Cousins' forte for 2026, because he does appear to have a pretty bright TV future ahead of him. So kind of fascinating how there's so many question marks and money's not really the issue, right? Like none of these conversations outside of Malik Willis getting 35 a year, none of these conversations we have with the quarterbacks right now are driven by the potential cost of the player, because I think we've gotten to a point now, Dan, where if you can play this position, you're worth whatever any team is willing to pay you. And if there's 3 teams, that means you're going to be paid more. And if there's 5 teams, you'll be paid even more than that. So supply and demand kind of gets thrown out the window at this point in time with this position, if you've proven you're worth something, which I guess does lead a little bit of relevance back to the Willis conversation, which is he proved it for a minute and a half. And maybe that's enough for some of these teams to latch onto, right? Mariota played a lot in 25. He's still an $8 million quarterback. That's what he made last year, starting basically half the year for the Commanders. He didn't impress me enough to get a job this year. In my opinion, he's just going to return to Washington as the essential backup to Jaden Daniels with the ability to start as needed. But he didn't blow me away at all in terms of amping up his stock back on the open market. Did he do anything for you?
No, I think he's settled into a never want to start him, but love to have him as your backup kind of quarterbacks. I mean, it's a good scheme fit behind Jaden Daniels there. I don't think he was good last year at all, but he is serviceable in the right situation. And I think that's fine if you bring him back in a backup role. But I don't think he's done anything to get himself back on the starter.
We are forgetting one team here for maybe all of the guys we've talked about, including Mariota. This is obviously what just piqued my thought. Is there any belief, Dan, that the Chiefs are going to want to slow play Mahomes and that they will need some sort of formidable 2026 quarterback, at least on paper? And maybe it doesn't work out that player ends up starting week 1, but maybe it does. And who knows if that turns into 8 weeks? You never know with these things. I mean, if this is your, not just your football franchise player, this is the pinnacle, name on every single, marketable option that you have within that franchise. They're going to want him on the field. And especially if Kelsey gets back, that's going to make even more demand to get him back on the field. But I just wonder if one of these guys becomes the placeholder in Kansas City for 2026.
Is that Phillip Rivers music I hear?
Oh my goodness.
No, I'm just kidding.
Absolutely not. It's more likely that it's like a Carson Wentz who has some experience in that system, right? But I guess it's interesting to think about one of these guys who has a little bit more starting experience recently. Who knows?
Yeah, we're
such a long way away from needing that. I just wonder where Kansas City's head is as we enter March, and the Mahomes stuff is looking like it looks, and who knows where we get to with these injury stuff. All right. I think I'm good there. Flacco's probably going to return in some capacity. We'll talk about that at the back end here. I threw Tyrod on this list, Tyrod Taylor, just because he's been a serviceable 4-week stopgap for somebody. He's a free agent. He's 36 years old. He did have an injury-filled 2025. Has he fallen below this bridge starting quarterback, Dan? Is he just a low QB2 for you right now at best?
Yeah, same situation. I mean, he got in last year out of dire necessity. So I don't want to put too much on the 2025 box scores, if you will. Not that you are. I'm just saying I'm not going to be convinced that he's all of a sudden a starter or anything like that.
All right, Cousins is going to walk away from Atlanta here. Is Atlanta